Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as I share with you the top 10 things that I'm doing in my garden this October. So let's go. Brr, there is a chill in the air. It is early October and our current daytime temperatures are somewhere between 50 and 60 degrees and our nighttime temperatures are around 30 to 40 degrees. Even though we don't have a frost forecasted within our 10-day forecast, typically during the month of October here in New Hampshire, we get our first frost. So it can be any time during this month. That means I need to prepare and get a lot done. So what I did recently was I made a list of things that I want to do during this month that have to do with my garden. And I figured I might as well share it with you in case it gives you some ideas, perhaps it inspires you. The one thing that I want to mention is this checklist may be adjusted date-wise or time-wise for you based on where your location is and what your zone is. But either way, it gives you an idea of what I'm doing in my garden, and maybe these are things that you need to be thinking about as well. So I narrowed my list down to 10 items. My goal is to complete them by the end of October. We'll see how I do. And some of it I plan on filming just to show you what the process is for some of these jobs that I'm going to be doing in the garden. And I'm planning on doing a video like this one pretty much monthly, and it has to do with gardening tasks. Even though in the winter, when it's snowing here, there are still things that I can be doing that are garden related. And I'll be sure to share with you some of those tasks that I plan on completing during the winter months. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you the 10 things I plan on doing during this month. Collecting seeds. That is something I've been doing for a number of years. It's something that gives me a lot of joy. I actually love educating other people on how to collect seeds. You can save so much money by collecting your own seeds, be it from flowers or from vegetables. I typically collect my seeds from my flowers. During this past year, I've been making a lot of videos showing you how to collect seeds, specifically from flowers. Next year, one of my goals is to show you how to collect seeds from vegetable plants as well. I typically start collecting my seeds sometimes during the end of August through September into October. But typically, once those freezing nights hit, I stop doing that. So that's why I'm giving myself the rest of October to keep collecting seeds, storing the seeds, and then I'm ready to go when it comes time to start my seeds sometime in December and January. And if you haven't checked it out, please check out the playlist that I've made, which shows you how to collect seeds from lots of different plants. I plan on making a lot more of those videos because I still have a ton of seeds that I've collected, and I still need to get those seeds packaged up and stored for the winter. During the springtime and early summer, together we put together a bunch of hanging baskets, window boxes, and container pots. All of those containers did very well during the summer months. However, some of them are not looking their very best anymore. So I'm definitely planning on taking those all apart. It's quite a process because I have quite a few pots. So I need to take them all down and then go through them all. If they're annuals, I'm going to put the annuals in my compost pile. And if the containers have perennials in them, well, the perennials need to go in my landscape. And since I need to get perennials into the ground about 8 weeks before the ground freezes, that job needs to happen pretty soon. So that's probably high on my priority list of things to do during the month of October. Blowing leaves. I have a ton of trees here where I live. It's a very wooded lot, and with the beautiful trees come a lot of leaves. New Hampshire is known for its fall foliage, and it really is beautiful when the leaves start to change color. And then eventually what happens is those leaves drop, and they are all over my yard. I do take pride in taking care of my lawn. I like my lawn to be healthy, nice and green. And if I was to leave all the leaves on my lawn until the end of fall, what happens is it would really mat down the grass. And in fact, it would even kill off certain areas of the grass. I've had people ask me, why don't I just wait? Why do I keep blowing the leaves off on a weekly basis? And that's the reason why. You don't want those leaves to mat down on the lawn. So pretty much every day, mid-October through mid-November, I'll be out there blowing the leaves off the lawn. I also plan on blowing the leaves off of where the lawn ends and where the woods begin because I have flower beds pretty much through the whole perimeter of my yard. So I also don't want all those leaves to mat down there. One thing I will say is leaves are definitely good for our gardens, including the lawn, as long as you do it correctly. So when I'm mowing my lawn, I like to mulch my grass, and while I'm mulching the grass, I like to mulch the leaves. But if there's a huge layer of leaves on the grass, then I can't mulch the leaves very easily. So I just have to time it just right. And I will continue to mow my grass without the bagger and mulch it with the leaves. But as soon as the leaves are coming down way too fast, at that point, it's time to really just get after it and blow those leaves off the lawn. And what I also like to do with my leaves is I like to use a leaf shredder, and I like to shred up the leaves and use it as a mulch in my flower beds. So what I plan on doing later on, probably November, once I have a ton of leaves, is I plan on mulching those up and putting it down throughout all my flower beds. And I'll be sure to show you the process for what I'm doing with that. Speaking of mulching the beds, now is a great time of year to add mulch to flower beds. What I use to mulch my beds is compost, and I use compost that I make myself. I have a huge pile of compost that's been sitting there all summer long, and it is ready to go. And so I plan on putting that down on a number of my flower beds. And I made that compost using last year's leaves. It is such a highly nutritious thing to add to my flower beds and my vegetable gardens. Irrigation. I have irrigation in my lawn as well as in many of my flower beds. So when it comes to irrigating the lawn here in New Hampshire, we have to turn off the irrigation before we get those freezing temperatures. It's very important. And so I've already turned off my irrigation because we really don't need anything to be irrigated this time of year. It's just getting too cold. And the company that I use for my irrigation system will be coming out, and they're just going to be blowing out all the water out of the pipes. So at least the irrigation system will be winterized from that standpoint. The other thing that my husband and I have been doing during the summer is we've been adding drip irrigation to many of our flower beds that don't currently have it. And we're going to continue doing that. So as I'm working on a bed and I'm blowing off the leaves and I'm doing some weeding, it's still a good time for us to be putting down the irrigation lines, even if the irrigation is not hooked up to it right now. It's just getting it all in place, ready to go for next spring. Weeding. It is a great time of year to still be weeding the flower beds. Now, once the ground freezes, the weeding will stop, but I still have plenty of time before that happens. You definitely want to get after your weeds, especially those perennial weeds, because what will happen is the perennial weeds will just get bigger for next year. So it is a big goal of mine to continue weeding my flower beds until the ground freezes. Caring for tender plants and bulbs. There are a number of plants that I have that will not survive being outside as the temperatures drop. I recently made a video and I showed you how to take your amaryllis bulbs and put them into dormancy. So those are all safe, they're not outside anymore, and they will be fine being in the house. But I still have a bunch of other plants that I need to take care of. I have geranium plants, for example. I like to bring them in. I prefer not to bring the plants in with the dirt and keep them as a house plant. It's my preference to bring them in bare root and store them in my basement during the winter months. And that process has worked for me the last few years, so I'm planning on doing that again. I also have a bunch of tubers, corms, and bulbs that I need to bring in because they will not survive out in the cold, harsh elements. Some of those include gladiolus bulbs, peacock orchid, and my dahlias. I have a bunch of dahlias, and I've been very successful with overwintering them in my garage. And what my plan is specifically for the dahlias is after we get our first hard freeze, that's when I'm going to bring my dahlias in. I also have some tuberous begonias that I bring in overwinter. So when I take care of all these bulbs and tubers and plants, I'll be sure to show you what my process is for overwintering them. Cutting back perennials and pulling annuals. This time of year, the annuals are definitely looking pretty sad. So I really like to pull a lot of my annuals well before a frost or a freeze hits them. Once the frost or freeze hits a lot of the annuals, especially annuals like begonias, impatiens, it really is hard to pull those annuals out. So if I see that in our forecast, if we are expecting a frost, I'm just going to go ahead and start yanking those annuals out. When it comes to my perennials, I like to keep many of my perennials up through the winter because it provides winter interest, and it's also good for the beneficial insects that are trying to find some cover during the winter months. However, there are some perennials that really should be cut back every year. Those include daylilies as well as peonies. Also, I do have a few tall plants like ornamental grasses. I really like to cut those back as well because they don't look good during the winter months. They end up flattening right down and they just look messy. If they actually stayed upright, I would keep them out there all winter long. However, that's not what they do. They just look awful. So it's better to cut those back during the fall as well. The way I look at it with cutting perennials back is anything that I can do during the fall months just makes my spring a lot less stressful. There are just so many things that are going on during the spring months. So sometimes it's just easier to cut as many perennials as I can back during the fall months. Healing plants in. I made a video recently showing you the process for what I do to heal my plants in, but it basically involves taking a potted plant where you might not have a place where you want to put it yet. And here in our cold environment, if that plant is in a pot and it's left exposed, there's a very high likelihood, especially if it's a smaller size plant, there's a very high likelihood that that plant would not survive for the simple reason that the roots are exposed on all sides of the pot. So it's better to take that pot and put it into the ground with dirt surrounding all sides of the pot. You want to leave the top part of the plant exposed, but the whole bottom part where the roots would be should be surrounded with soil. In a way, when you think about it, it's kind of like taking a plant and planting it in the ground. It's a similar type of thing. The only big difference is you might have a potted plant and you don't know where you want to put it in your landscape. Healing the plant in that way is a great way to save that plant and keep it safe during the winter months. So I still have some plants that I'm working on, and I'm planning on getting those healed in pretty quickly. Winterizing the pond. We have a small pond that we put in years back, and every year we need to set up the filter and the pump and get everything going. Well, pretty soon we need to get the filter and the pump taken out of the pond because we don't want to do that when the water temperature is freezing cold, and we also don't want to do that if all of a sudden we're getting freezing nights. We want to make sure it's done well before that. So during the month of October, that will be done. So those are my top 10 things that I'm planning to do in the garden during the month of October. The list was quite extensive and I narrowed it down. I wanted to be realistic, and there were definitely some things that I could push off and do during November. So sometime early November, I'll make a different video showing you what my goals are for November when it comes to the garden. But I highly suggest that you do the same thing. Make a list. It doesn't have to be a huge list, and try to be realistic with your goals on what you want to get done in your garden. And I suggest that maybe you prioritize it based on your temperatures, the weather, your time that you might have. But I find when I make a list, in general with anything I do in my life, but especially with gardening, that I'm more apt to complete those tasks. It definitely feels great to just check things off my list. I'm curious about what are you doing in your garden during the month of October? Are you doing any of the things that I'm doing? Are you doing some other different things? I'm sure if you live in a warmer climate, your list would look quite different than my list. Or if you live in a much colder climate, you might have other things that you're doing. So please drop a comment below and share with us what you're doing in your garden during the month of October. Well, I hope you're getting a lot done in your gardens, and until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.